That's all right. Probably, I didn't get it here, so probably called my hand. This is one of those wonderful events, as everyone has been joking about. It's difficult, not only getting this thing together, but getting here, which always means it's really worthwhile. I remember we'd be joking about that one. And I think there's some truth to it. Very, very often what we do is, when we run into difficulties, we have a tendency to give up. And I think it's a strange thing. That seems to be the New Age view of things, that everything should just happen easily. If it happens easily, it's great, then it's meant to be, right? Everything's in the right place. But sometimes things are hard and you have to soldier on. You really got to decide to go along this and push through. And we all know that. We all know that from our own experiences in life. So I think that we have all suffered tremendously to be here in the most ironic and bizarre ways. Nothing terrible. No, it's not like things falling out of the sky, but it's one more pebble in the shoe. It's one more pebble in the shoe. And then you think maybe I'll go barefoot, but no, that doesn't work either. So you take your shoe off, you get the pebble out, and you go on. Now, many of you have been here before, so as you know, we have a single candle lit, and we call that the candle to the past masters. Past masters of what? The tradition. And for us, that is all of the great teachers of the Hermetic tradition. All of them. For which we can use Hermes, or we can use Thoth, the Egyptian god Tehuti, as our focal point. We'll talk more about that later. And to get us into the proper frame of mind, let us remind ourselves of the opening oration, which we have used so often in the past. And we take this from the Hermetica. Holy is God, the Father of all, who is before the first beginning. Holy is God, whose purpose is accomplished by his several powers. Holy is God, who wills to be known, and is known by them that are his own. Holy art thou, who by thy word created all that is. Holy art thou, whose brightness nature has not darkened. Holy art thou, of whom all nature is an image. Holy art thou, who art stronger than all domination. Accept pure offerings of speech from a soul and a heart uplifted to thee, thou of whom no words can tell, no tongue can speak, only silence can declare. I pray that I may never fall away from that knowledge of thee which matches with our being. Grant thou my prayer. And put power into me so that, having obtained this gift, I may enlighten those of my race who are in ignorance, my brothers and thy sons. Wherefore I believe and bear witness that I enter into life and light. Wise words, although written by my decaying hand, remain imperishable through time, imbued with the medicine of immortality by the All-Master. Be unseen and undiscovered by all those who will come and go, wandering the wastelands of life. Be hidden until an older heaven births human beings who are worthy of your wisdom. And having sounded this prayer over the works of his hands, Hermes was received into the sanctuary of eternity. Now, just a quick review for those of you who have been here in the past and those of you who are new to this. We've always said that there are fundamentally 4 levels of any practice. Okay? We have what is called exoteric or outer practices, which are fundamentally collective worship, which we get in a church setting. You come together to learn things, and you do it in a manner where the teaching is very much a historical teaching. You're led to believe that these things are historically true. Okay. Very much the emphasis is on morality and ethics. This is often a lot of duality is imbued into this, and this is often involves what we call a path of negation. Don't do this. Basically, stop screwing your life up and stop doing this. Okay. Then we move into what we would call esoteric. Now, esoteric always means inner or interior. So there are many, many aspects of what we consider esotericism. But even the most basic religious mysticism is still esotericism. We can play around with words, but for practical purposes, it still qualifies. And as soon as we move into that inner level, on that first level, we're trying to say, well, I have all these teachings that I've gotten from my religious school of instruction, but I want to internalize them, I want to understand them better, I want to make them personal. So we would call that a mystical instruction, or the earliest levels of esotericism. Here, very often, we seek to understand the scriptures or the religious teachings personally, and about what can we do. The first time it's what not to do. Okay, like don't stick a fork in the outlet, it's a bad idea. To now, well, what can I put in there to use the energy that's there? Okay. So this is a path of action. The next thing is, how can I take these ideas and put them in practice in my life? The third level, which is still a continuation of the esoteric path, is what we would call initiatic. And here, it's not just not doing things that are harmful to us or others, and doing things which are good and helpful to us, but it's a beginning to identify with those forces and ideas on a very deep personal level where a transformation takes place. And this is the aspect of all initiatic traditions, is transformational. So those of you who've gone through various Martinist or Rosicrucian or Masonic initiations can look back and recognize, well, what do these symbols mean? What is this activity that's going on here? And the fact is, it's transformational on some level. Something is changing within you. And very often, what is that change? Well, instead of avoiding with that which is negative, we now try to take those negative experiences, those difficult experiences that we have in life, and turn them into something. How can we use what they represent? How can we use their energy? How can we turn them into something helpful to us? Okay. Those of you who are particularly familiar with medicine, I know you do Chinese medicine. You do acupuncture as well, right? Okay. Brian, you guys might want to talk. You know that an energy block is just that, it's a block. There's something there. And you want to get it moving. You want to move it through. Not just obliterate it, because then if you obliterate it, what happens? Then you're left with nothing, and then you got to fill it up again. And that's what happens in our lives. Often, as I joked before, we either kind of often run away from obstacles. And that's really the path of negation in the beginning. Oh, it's not happening. You know, I'll just kind of step back. Well, that's okay at times, but that's not an initiatic view. An initiatic view is, how can I take all these things that life is presenting me and use them and turn them into something positive? Okay. And that happens with identification through the forces. That's where we begin to see these symbols, not just historically, but we begin to see them in our bodies. Hence the whole ideas of psychic centers and psychic anatomy. We see them in the world. Hence the ideas of associations, where we talk about iron and the color red and the planet Mars, that chain of being. Well, how can we work with that? Well, anytime we're dealing with transformation, we're almost always dealing, at least in Western Hermeticism, with alchemy, and of course spagyrics, but also any kind of ritual magic. Those are the two primary schools. After that, we move into something even deeper, and that is the notion of direct experience. This would be the supreme mystical experience, direct knowing. Everything is clear. You see and understand things as they are, even if just for a moment. Maybe not permanently, but at least for a moment. And this is where we begin to see what is the difference between, for example, clairvoyance, which is to see clearly, and some kind of psychic aberration. You see something symbolically, and you know it has meaning, but you can't figure it out. Yeah? What does this mean? Yeah. Can you make it clear for once? I just want to know, what does it mean? Where we push through the ambiguity of our mind. We push through the obstructions in our mind, and we see things as they are. And more importantly, ourselves. This is self-realization. This is non-dual. There's nothing that you avoid. There's nothing that you do. You just seek to look at things and experience them as they are. This is very important because in many ways this is a path of surrender. And that's why in that mystical literature you often talk about surrender. Surrender means not doing. And not doing simply is not avoidance, as we often think of it, but just being receptive to what is going on within us and receptive to what is going on around us and noticing our perceptions. So the teaching that we're going to have today qualifies on that level. So it is in many ways very, very simple, but it can be very complex because we want things to be more difficult than they are. We love things to be difficult. We love the heroic path because there's so much to do. Love it. But at the same time, those who have done it for many, many years will often tell you, then you have to stop. We jokingly say the heroic path is for those who just need to burn that out of themselves and get rid of it. Now, language. When we speak of enlightenment, well, illumination, what we're talking about is illumination is just that, enlightenment, or to be filled with light, literally. The three things which we focus on are light, life, and love. And they are inseparable. When we talk about salvation, we mean to be saved from error or sin. Sin, again, is failure to miss the point. It is to grasp the outcome of our actions, the meanings, the possibilities. So when we seek salvation, essentially we're looking for healing or freedom from our own suffering in this or any other life. The Latin word salvus means to be whole or uninjured, as well as have health, be soothing and easing. Ease is what makes everything possible. Ease and relaxation. We're going to see that again and again. The most important thing is to be relaxed but attentive. Relaxed but attentive. And that allows you then to be open, or what we think of as spontaneous, to what is occurring. Because our preconceived notions, which have been very helpful to us in the past, our preconceived notions on these first, second, and third levels of teaching, very helpful to us. Now we realize that even those have to be let go of. Grace means the divine blessing, but again for us it is just that, it is surrender or relaxation. It does not come from without, but is grace. True grace is the gift we give from within to ourselves. And again, the other notion, the other word you hear often in a lot of the medieval literature is surrender. Surrender is letting go. Letting go. Now, faith at this level is unconcerned with outer signs. That's an exoteric practice. It is unconcerned with theory or philosophical notions. It does not even have any concern for what we would think of as radical devotion. Radical devotion to an ideal, radical devotion to a practice. Okay? It is a faith is a confidence born of our own direct experience. Because in the end, no matter what we do, that is the only thing we have. That is the only thing we can truly rely upon. So the practices that we're going to talk about today are a bridge, in many ways, between a lot of those initiatic teachings that many of you are familiar with through ritual magic or alchemy, okay, or even some more complex meditations, and this state of attentiveness, this mystical union. What makes this most difficult is that when we enter into this state, there are no rules. When you enter into these levels of practice, well, the rules are, again, what are they? Therefore, the other levels. Don't do this. Do this. Meditate on this. They're all very useful. But if you don't have some experience from that allows you to be free and self-sufficient, then of what value were they? So at this point, there are no rules, only methods. And Their only thing is the personal experience derived from those methods. That personal experience is the basis of your own wisdom or awakening. To practice them, all you need to do is be relaxed and undistracted. We say relax, pay attention, and I like the word uninhibited. We hear the word spontaneous a lot, but what we mean by spontaneous is uninhibited. Let go of any of your preconceived notions, and you've got tons of them. And that's what a lot of those earlier practices were designed to bring up and transform, so that you could notice them, or so that you could get rid of some of them. Okay? Here, there's nothing even to get rid of, just to be undistracted from what is going on. Distraction is death. Okay? Distraction is Satan. Satan is what? The loyal opposition. Always trying to get you to look over here. And I think you know the great story in the Old Testament. Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, God, you're great. Satan's, you know what? Let me go check on that one for you, God. God goes down. Satan goes down. Okay, he was undistracted. He stayed true. He soldiered on. Distraction is the opposition. Distraction is the demiurge. The purpose of this work and of all spiritual work is your freedom. It is to be free. So here you have the freedom to practice as you see fit for yourself. No one is to decide for you what is best for you. You have to now decide this for yourself, based upon all of the experiences which you have brought to this point. That freedom requires, however, that you simply understand the origin, the method, and the outcome, or expected outcome, of what you are going to be practicing. Know the principles. I remember when taking classes with Jacques Glass, very, very big on that with spagyrics and all alchemical work. Know the principles. Know what it is, the practices, and what the expected outcome will be, so that you can notice it. As we're going to see across the day, very often we get the results we want, we simply don't notice them. And I think we can look at, this is no different from our other aspects of our life. How often haven't we undertaken something? We had a goal in mind, but we weren't really clear about that goal. Or maybe we were. And we achieved the goal, but we got distracted along the way. And someone had said, but wait a minute, that you got what you wanted. You got what you wanted. You said to me you were after this, and now you've got it. What's the problem?
Changed my mind.
I changed my mind. It's a woman's prerogative to change her mind. That's right.
We can say that today.
We can say that. And that's fill in the blank there. and that's the issue is often we think we know what we want and we're confused about what we want. And we'll talk about that later on this morning, and how to get rid of that confusion. And we get what we're after, but we just don't even know it. And the better part is when we actually get it and we know it. And then you can move on. Which means, the important thing is when receiving any teachings like this, these are considered initiatic or esoteric. And this is not just intellectual information, but ideas and methods that are given to you so that it may lead you to certain similar experiences and conclusions as others who have undertaken. It's very important to recognize. The essence of being of ourselves is changed through them. And the search is not done just for ourselves alone, but for others. And we can look at this in many different ways. Within many Christian denominations, and even many modern denominations, such as the ones whose building we share, there's a great deal of emphasis on external action, helping others, charitable contributions and work, all which are very good. However, they in and of themselves cannot be an end, nor should they be. They are an example of the work, they are not the work. More importantly is the bond which we form with fellow travelers on the path, this path of return as we call it. It is very much for them, because they are our fraters, our brothers, our sisters, our sorors, who are journeying with us, who we can help, and they in turn can help us. This happens in formal associations, such as initiatic societies or religious organizations, as well as informal associations, such as ourselves here together, or other ones to which you may have belonged, such as when I was in the Philosophers of Nature, when that existed. A profound informal association that had a profound bond, where people knew one another, they helped one another along their path of unfoldment. So we do this for each other as well as ourselves. And then there may be others who you know, others who you know, others who you know, who in turn you can help. And this forms in part that notion of an invisible college, if you will, invisible brotherhood. I like this quote. Esotericism does not require any act of faith. Rather, it requires goodwill and a spirit free of a priori assumptions and prejudices. Thus, one's criteria and knowledge will be a result and not a starting point. We go in, we practice, we see what happens. No different than what you do in music, no different than what you do in cooking. You have some ideas, and you're going to try something new. No different than what you do. Sometimes, let's see if it works. Right? Okay. In many teachings, we either explicitly or implicitly, for lack of a better term, take refuge, is what they say in Buddhism. And we see this in Christianity and Judaism as well, where they say, the Lord is my refuge, or in the name of, okay, or under his wings. This is saying that I go here for protection, I go here for guidance. In this level of teaching, this level of practice, the refuge or authority upon which our experience exists is not a historical person, a mythological being, but our own mind, our own experience. We take refuge in ourselves, if you will. It is in my own name. Hence all that talk about the discovering of your inner name that you see in different Kabbalistic teachings. It is within yourself that you take this responsibility. Because that's the only place you can take it, because there's nowhere else to go. Because who was it that said it? What was that one teacher? Wherever you go, there you are. I mean, that's it. You can't run from yourself no matter how hard you try. So here, instead of running from yourself, it's being okay with who you are. Not even running in, because there's nothing to run to. It's being okay with who you are and being confident in who you are. We are responsible for ourselves. And when we pray or make invocations, it is not with hope, but with certainty. Certainty that these beings we call gods or goddesses, saints or heroes or heroines, that they will manifest concretely for us. Because as the ancient Greek school said, they outlined for us the 4 things we need to pay attention to. 1 is tranquility of mind. 2 is, as we've talked about, revelation through dreams. 3, what they call purification of fire. Can you see the paths, the levels as they're unfolding now? First level, tranquility of mind. Second level, revelation through dreams, having an inner state. 3, purification through fire, or transformation, manipulation of energies. And 4, becoming a hero, a god, or an immortal. These statements are nearly identical to what we see in the aphorisms of the Arbitel of Magic appended to the 4th book of occult philosophy. Now, as our preliminary meditation, what I want you to think of, because there is nothing to visualize here, there's nothing to call upon, it is an understanding, is that often when we speak of Eastern and Western traditions, we act as if there are these definite boundaries to things. And as we see, there are not. And at this point in the game, for us to talk about Eastern and Western traditions is really meaningless. In fact, it's pointless. Now, the reasons for this are simple. History and illumination. The relative and the absolute. The Silk Road was widely traveled from Greece to China. And the cross-fertilization of esoteric practices and ideas is extremely well documented in this area, even if those who practice them refuse to acknowledge it. We see many people out there, whether it be Tibetan Buddhists who focus only on their own notions of actually having been a cloistered realm, or whether it's Westerners who think that there actually was no Eastern influence. All of this is nonsense. There was an extremely extensive cross-fertilization of ideas from Greece all the way to China. Professor Herbert Grunther, in his final book, The Teachings of Padmasambhava, makes a very powerful case for the influence of both Sethian and Valentinian Gnosticism in the formation of Tibetan Vajrayana. Gnosis on the Silk Road, Gnostic Parables, Hymns and Prayers from Central Asia, by Hans Joachim Klimkeit, demonstrates that this wide interchange of what we call Western and Middle Eastern ideas with the East, or Indo-Tibetan, took place extensively in that grand esoteric melting pot we call Central Asia. One of my favorites, the French author and musicologist Alain Danilou, author of Shiva and the Primordial Tradition, Gods of Love and Ecstasy, the traditions of Shiva and Dionysius, and while the gods play the Shiva oracles and the predictions on the cycles of history and the destinies of mankind, demonstrates emphatically the high degree of cross-cultural exchanges that took place between the Mediterranean and India at that time. One of the things that's most easily demonstrated to people who question this is I'll say, well, if you'll notice, as far east as Tibet, the Tibetans use a modified Chinese astrology for the animals, but all of the elemental system they use is Western. And it's Greek. It went to Greece by way of the Middle East and into India. Just that simple. So you have this extensive interchange taking place. But what happens is, as different groups take on these methods, is they codify them to fit the method of transformation that they are trying to present.
They also try to veil it too, at the same time?
I don't know how much is veiling. I'm sure there's some, because everyone wants to pretend that they've got a secret. And that's a very important part. That's part of the sales pitch. And that sales pitch has been forever. That's, hey, we got a secret here. We got something that we else has. Okay. I was talking to a fellow not too many days ago, an Italian fellow. And we were supposed to meet up earlier this summer, but it was unable to because of the death of his mother. And when we were talking, and he said, well, when I get together, I'll give you this teaching. Well, the teaching is the highest, one of the highest teachings there is in Italian Hermeticism. Okay. The highest. He said, but I'll tell you, Mark, it's not going to be much that you don't already know. But I'll give you the whole thing anyhow, just so you can say that you've had it. And then you can do with it what you will. Okay? And it's their variation on the body of light. Okay? So thank you very much. When I get it, we'll take care of it. And in exchange, I'll tell him what I know, what it's similar to. But my experience has been, what is important is the codification helps for synthesis so that things move smoothly, so that you don't end up with indigestion. One of the problems is that people take from all over the place indiscriminately is they can't make sense of it, and they get psychic indigestion. So very early in the game, it's very important to have a very smooth and codified method of teaching and practice. Once you've gotten some interior results from that, particularly good interior results, then you're able to branch out and experiment. Because, again, what do you need to understand? What is the essence of it? What is it supposed to do? How are you supposed to do it? Okay? And then what are your results? And then you can begin to see where it has similarities to things you've already done. And then what they would do is they would say, for example, oh, well, this is similar to this, so what I'll do is I'm just going to change the face of this teaching so that it fits in with this format that I've already got. See, we're not dealing with that. We're saying at this level, and I'll give you practices to do before the end of the day, we're about experiencing something directly. And then when you have that experience, then you're able to see relationships to everything else. You're able to see where things don't stand alone, but there are interdependencies and interchanges. Now, culture is relative and essential for this transmission of philosophy and method, but personal illumination is truth, and it transcends those limitations. And that is why we can take so many different forms and expressions of truth while maintaining this central core of amongst these diverse forms of transmissions. One thing that's really important that I want to stress here is something that all of you have heard me talk about. And I was talking to our good friend, Dr. Lashevsky, earlier this week about it. And it's something he and I have talked about extensively. When we get involved in esoteric practices, and in particular higher psychic functioning and higher mystical functioning, it's very, very easy to get lost. And it's also very easy to think that we know more about things than we do. We've all seen it. We've all done it. What's important, though, and I emphasize this with each and every one of you, is to have and enjoy having a good basic understanding of and basic knowledge of psychology, of physics, of chemistry, of the sciences. These things are extremely important because they are an expression of these truths. You make chocolate confections, and that involves chemistry, whether we know it or not. If it's just a technique and you're a technician, that's wonderful too. You can still make beautiful things. But to understand the chemistry behind it elevates it to a new level, even if the people who enjoy it don't know that, but you do. So anytime we understand how things work and appreciate it just in and of itself, we have a deeper appreciation for this notion of non-duality. It's simply not enough to have the perception, although that's the foundation point. It's very important that we understand how things work in the relative sense so that we can express that accurately to others. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Understand the importance of it. Okay? Otherwise, we end up like all too often speaking in vagaries or too artistic. I love the arts. Art's wonderful. but it's math that built this building. Okay. And that's something we have to say. We have to have that knowledge, basic fundamental knowledge of how our physical world works, because it is part of our experience. In fact, some can argue at this level that it is summation of our experience, and we'll get to that later.
You're basically saying all seven societies
Have a fundamental understanding of all of them, all the liberal arts and sciences in particular, which are a little different, but than what I was saying, but they're the
like logic, like if I'm having a problem with logic, try to keep just jumping into it.
That's right. What is the consequences of my actions? What is the outcomes? Again, you can be very logical, but if your premise is false, then your conclusion will be false. And we don't grasp that. We've lost this. Same thing with rhetoric, the ability to present your ideas clearly to another. The foundations of the liberal arts and sciences as expressed in Freemasonry are extremely important. And therein is geometry. Geometry is placed there because that's the queen of the sciences. Geometry is what allows all this to happen. Yeah. Now, let me read something to you here. Non-duality is essentially seeing God everywhere. The question for us is, what is God? Well, we'll get to that, but you have to figure that out for yourself. Now, all of you have read Regardie's one-year manual, or 12 Steps of Enlightenment. Every one of you. But for those of you who may not, let me get to this part. Now that through the pursuit of this series of psychospiritual disciplines, some degree of God realization has been achieved, the student is faced by a most important decision. He is obliged to eradicate every vestige of duality from his thinking. Residues will cling to his mind in very subtle ways. There is no God and the world. There is not God and himself. There is only God. All is God. Every trivial action is God-directed. Every single object in his environment is God-endowed. Even the ego, though that seems to be a major obstacle to be gotten rid of, is God-determined. Yet he is a man or a woman living for the moment in what appears to be a material world. He has to accept the world of appearances, the phenomenal world exactly as it is. Heat burns, cold freezes, etc. Although each and every one of these phenomena are divine phenomena, and in their constant change are nonetheless representatives of the ceaseless activity of the unchanging, omnipotent body of God, yet he must learn to keep these diverse phenomena in their place. What then shall he do to work his will, to achieve his goals? He is surrounded by people who are hysterical, anxious, compulsive, disturbed by one event or a problem after another, are sick, lame, and halt. All this because they know not what or who they truly are. How shall we presume to make them aware of their true nature without invading their precious privacy? In other words, though he knows his personal relationship to God, he, that is each one of us, must consider those methods whereby our needs are to be met and our divine purpose, that is our will, fulfilled. There are many ways, of course, to do this. One of these are the methods described in the Art of True Healing. It is the method of mobilizing the spiritual powers of the cosmos through the agency of will, color, and imagination, and sound in order to achieve that which is required. It is an extension of the middle pillar wherein divine energy is concentrated and directed for specific use. There is another approach, which is possible only to that student who has persevered with his own disciplines so that he has become an avenue through which the divine will may operate. Its outstanding merit is that it is simple and direct. It is not dissimilar to the classical religious one of accepting Jesus as one's personal Lord and Savior and turning one's life over to him. This approach has in it that we are eager to find him. When we come to realize that there is no source or power in ourselves, that we are wholly dependent on him, we become eager to connect up with this source of life and power when we know it makes for wisdom, power, and love available to us. This is the straight gate, the narrow way, and the few be that find it. In this work we use the term the holy guardian angel. as a term for our own higher self. He is an angel, mighty and powerful, and is our personal link with the universal God, and so it is to him that we submit ourselves for the fulfillment of his will, which at the same time paradoxically is our own will. We cannot make a vital contact with our angel by goodness or by obedience. Remember, these are the outer practices. Nor may we find him because of our good deeds. Here it is, the second level of practice. At best, our good deeds are only evidence that we have found him. Nor do we find him by relief in any religious or metaphysical or occult doctrine. There it is, philosophy and even the practices of the third level. At best, these are intellectual constructs for the expansion of our mind, but later come to have profound meaning as useful constructs only after we have found him. If we are willing to persevere, to be patient, and to work as self-discipline, to aspire and to invoke often, the angel will enable us to do all of this, and we do not have to do violence to ourselves to force ourselves to believe in him. There is no need for force. We do not have to will ourselves to believe. We only have to be willing to make the necessary set of gestures sincerely and honestly, and the work and invoke often. It entails trusting the Holy Guardian Angel with all areas of our lives. In this we must face our egotism to realize that of ourselves we can do nothing, and that we're able to do only results in futility and frustration. It means trusting the angel to renew our character, for we cannot do it ourselves. We turn over to him the entire psyche, and with it its conscious and unconscious problems and complexes that we've become acquainted with through the agency of these former practices. We leave it to him to clean out the filth from the stables when it ceases to be filth. Only he can do it. Of ourselves we are impotent. It means allowing him to dictate all the activities and in keeping our hands and minds from meddling with his work, reserving them only as tools for which he can use as he sees fit. Does not mean that we stop worrying about what is going to become of us. We take care of our lives and do not allow ourselves to be reckless. But it means putting away our entire little occult philosophies and systems, where everything is put into neat cubby holes and neatly compartmentalized, and letting him lead us to truth. It is the joy of putting aside our human frailties and allowing him to sanctify us. This is the magical way of letting the angel to do his work among the living, of having placed oneself under the aegis of the angel, and of having worked and prayed and invoked. And now is the responsibility for all of one's life in its phases. And here, when this is done, we realize that we are the agency for the one self made perfect, and understand the meaning of, I am he, the boundless spirit, having sight in the feet and strong in the immortal fire. I am he, the truth. I am he that hateth that evil should be wrought in the world. I am he that lighteth and thundereth, and I am he that from whom is the shower of the life of the earth. I am he whose mouth ever flameth. I am he the begetter and the manifester unto the light. I am he, the grace of the world. The heart girt with the serpent is my name. You notice how Regardi takes us through those four phases that I mentioned.
That's really cool.
That's
Really cool.
Okay. Now we'll talk about how that surrender is done. Again, that release. I say surrender because that's the language here, but it's relaxation. That's a much better word. Relaxing. Every one of us was faced with tremendous obstacles in getting here, and the only way we overcame them was just not worrying about them. Right? Mm-hmm. Just relax. It'll get done. It'll get done. And it can be hard because you want to do things.
With relaxation comes sort of like a confidence as well, though. You're relaxing into the certainty.
Yes, well, that is it. The certainty that it will get done. That it will get achieved. It's not just a matter of, let it go. It's focusing on the goal and knowing that the goal is going to be achieved. We can talk about the methods that we use to do that. There's different methods we do to psych ourselves into it. But ultimately, that method is, again, let me get back to this. That the esoteric practices at this point are very natural. Okay, they're very natural. They're not contrived. I mean, we can do things to help us. We can visualize an outcome that we desire. But then once you visualize that outcome, you no longer dwell upon it. You think about it, and you decide that this is the outcome I want in my life, this is the thing I want, and then you let it go. Letting it go doesn't mean that you forget about it, but it's what he's talking about here, handing it over to your holy guardian angel. And you can conceive of the holy guardian angel as a person if you want. You can conceive it as a force. There are many ways you can think of it that helps you grasp it. But in fact, what it is it's your own subconscious. Now, part of this, too, is you say, well, what about all that crap I have in my subconscious that I'm trying to filter out? You don't worry about that anymore. You see, you let it go. You're unconcerned with it. That's one of the purposes of meditation is some of the words, I wish we had better language, honestly. We don't have a good language for some of these things. But it is when you pay attention. We call it mindfulness. I don't like that word. I don't like it at all. Paying attention. Paying attention to what you're doing, not being distracted. So you meditate, and these ideas come up, and these images come up, and these feelings come up, and all this stuff comes up. And what happens? People get distracted. So we tell you, don't be distracted by it. What should I do? Well, you can follow it back to find out where it comes from. Yes, you can. That's the therapeutic model. That's the manipulative model. That's the transformative model. We seek to understand. And that's helpful to a degree. But even there, at some point, what do you have to do? You got to stop and not worry about it. Let it go. We're very hung up on the therapeutic process. We are obsessed with the therapeutic process, particularly in this culture. But the therapeutic process really doesn't do any good for most people because they just keep spinning and spinning. Because they're trying to change what they can't change. They're trying to control what they can't control. Trying to control is the whole problem. You have to have trust and faith and confidence that everything will be okay. That it will work out in your best interests. And with that, the best interest for others. So that's where people then get hung up. Well, are my best interest the best interest for others? Well, then moralizing. See, that's part of the therapeutic trap. You just have to have faith. If you truly have faith, then you're not concerned about it. That it will be okay. Everything will work out. We'll get this done. That's why you see a high level of accomplishment among people who are very confident. You may not like them. But at the same time, they can be very successful. And yet many of the people who, we think are more likable or nice are just so really unachieved. And often because they're spewing around in all sorts of self-contradictions. See, as I said, at this level, there's confidence. And what is your confidence in? If you truly believe in this aspect of yourself, which is divine or holy guardian angel or whatever you want to call it, then there's no reason to have any contradiction about the outcomes, is there? There's no reason to have any concern. Because how could it do anything other than that which is in your best interest if you get out of the way? And how could your best interest be anything other than what is the best interest for others? It doesn't mean you understand it, though. And this is where people get hung up. They seek to understand, well, why did that happen? We had, an experience last week, and I shared it with Brian. It was a kind of experience locally. It was what we call a terrible tragedy. It's the kind of thing that really is a destroyer of faith. The kind of thing that when it happens, it destroys your faith. You say, how can something like that happen? Is that an answer you really want? Most people ask that question don't want the answer. They really don't. Or then you get trite answers. Oh, it's God's will. Everything will be okay. Or someone says, the karma ran out. Yeah. That was what people tell me to say, well, enjoy that good karma before it runs out. And I say, it doesn't have to run out. There are alternatives. And then they look at me confused because their good Gelukpa training has told them that it must run out. Okay? At this point, there are none of those. There's only your experience. Understand? and your faith and trust and confidence in yourself. Now, we say, looking, where do we find God? Well, we said in non-dual, God is everywhere and everything. And have I not told this to you half a dozen times? Again, I will read it to you. It is from the Corpus Hermeticum, Book 11. Consider yourself and command your soul to go anywhere, and it will be there quicker than your command. Bid it to go to the ocean, and again, it is there at once. Not as if it had gone from place to place, but is already there, ordered to fly up to the heavens, and it will need no wings, nor will anything impede it, neither the fire of the sun, nor the ether, nor the whirlwind, nor the other heavenly bodies, but cutting through them all, it will soar up to the last body. And if you wish to break through all of this, and to contemplate what is beyond, if there is anything beyond the cosmos, it is in your power. See what power you have and what speed. You can do all these things, and yet God cannot. Reflect on God in this way as having all within himself, as ideas, the cosmos himself, the whole. If you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot understand him. Like is understood by like. Grow to immeasurable size. Be free from every body. Transcend all time. Become eternity, and thus you will understand God. Suppose nothing to be impossible for yourself. Consider yourself immortal and able to understand everything, all arts, sciences, and the nature of every living creature. Become higher than all heights and lower than all depths. Sense as one within yourself the entire creation, fire, waters, the dry and the moist. Conceive of yourself to be in all places at the same time, in the earth and the sea and the heavens and that which is not yet born. That you are within the womb, that you are young, old, dead, and that you are beyond death. Consider all things at once, time, places, actions, qualities, and quantities. Then you can understand God. But if you lock up your soul and your body in a basin, say, I understand nothing, I can do nothing, I'm afraid of the sea. I cannot reach heaven, I do not know who I was nor what I shall be, then what have you to do with God? For you cannot conceive anything beautiful or good while you are attached to the body. For the greatest evil is to ignore what belongs to God. To be able to know and to will and to hope is the straight and easy way appropriate to each that will lead to the supreme good. When you take this road, this good will meet you everywhere, and you will be experienced everywhere, even where and when you do not expect it. When awake, asleep, in a ship on the road, by night or by day, when speaking and when silent, and there is nothing which it is not. Now do you say that God is invisible? Be careful, for who is more manifest than he? He has made all things for this reason, that through them you should see him. This is the goodness, the agatha, of God. To this his excellence, that he made manifest through all. Though you cannot see what is bodiless, nous, that is mind, is seen in the act of contemplation. God is in the act of creation. These things have been made clear to you, Hermes, thus far. Reflect on all other things in the same way within yourself, and do not be led astray. So you see, all of these things are there. You just don't see it. That's what I said earlier. Pay attention so that you can see what it is you're after. How often, and we're talking about this in diagnosing an illness, you can only diagnose what you're looking for. I've had so many people come to me and they say, how do they miss that? How do they miss that? It's very easy. How often do we miss everything, right? How could you miss it? It was right there all the time. I didn't see it. Fill in the blank. fill in the blank that someone has said to you, and you'll hear, right? You can only see what you're open to seeing. And that's why we have to say, be careful. That's where relaxation, attentiveness allows us to be perceptive. It allows us open to what's happening within us and around us. Whereas if we're too, focused, go, all the time, it's all the time. It's not just that time, but all the time. Then we miss what's happening. You don't see the very reality of the presence of God right there.
That's interesting if you look at it just from a lifestyle perspective, urban versus rural. Because you're in the city, you're part of that manic anxiety of go.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is why, if you look at the scriptures, and of course these are the older scriptures, most of the Oriental, that when they talk about the Kali Yuga, they talk about the formation of cities as being really the downfall of humanity. And it's not so much, even cities that we understand, our notion, or I mean, their cities were far smaller. But can you imagine having, even 30, 40, 50,000 people in some of these cities? 100,000 people in some of them? Just the smell horrible. Because they've got their animals too. Can you imagine? They said one of the reasons they had to hurry up and sign the Declaration of Independence was to get out of Philadelphia. Yeah. The number of horses was double or triple that of the human population. Yeah. So this notion of concentrating human beings in places is, in many ways, we benefit a great deal from it, but it has, again, everything has its plus and its minus. And now we've ramped this up to such a speed where our ability to contemplate is being seriously damaged by the technology that we're becoming increasingly dependent on. Yeah. So it's not that the technology is bad, it's about balance. Most people don't have enough wherewithal to not get entrained, to get hooked in. The external stimuli is too overwhelming. The external stimuli keeps them just pulled out. I'm focused without. And then all of that information comes in. And then it forms ideas and their processing of formations, rather than at any time just shutting it off and saying, what's going on inside my own mind? They're terrified of their own mind. Because their mind has no order. Their mind is so disorganized that once sleep comes, once any relaxation comes, it's not a stupor, once death comes, the cork gets pulled off and now all that stuff comes out, and it's a terrifying notion to it.
It's terrifying for most of them just to be in a quiet room.
Yeah, just to be in a quiet room.
Forget about the mind.
Yeah.
Take your smartphone away for a day, then you'll see some real panic.
Yeah.
Turn it off.
Yeah, and we have to really pay attention to this because we're struggling with that. So one of the ways to struggle is to just not struggle, not worry about it. We relax, not worry about it. Okay, phone is, turn it off. Don't worry. I have my phone off. Well, why am I anxious? We can think about it now. We can use some reflection. Well, why? Oh, it's just a habit. I formed a habit. Am I really that important that I have to be connected all the time? You see how these senses of self that develop. Or worse, maybe you do because of your business, but then you have to step back and think, yeah, really. I had a friend who was a doctor, and she said, look, I do mostly arthritis. There's no emergencies in arthritis. Take 2 ibuprofen. I'll see you in the morning. But when you get in the habit, and we'll talk about that, how these habits form, they then become our dominating force, and they keep us. They keep us from experiencing things as they are. Again, mind, everything proceeds from mind. We can use our thoughts, our words, and our actions to express as well as understand ourselves. When we think of our mind, we think of 2 things. It has a subjective aspect and an objective aspect. But what we're often focusing is, what is myself? What is my character? What is my personality? And for this we say, personality is just that, persona or mask. It's something which changes with depending on who we are and what environment we're in. But our character is consistent. Can you be trusted? Do you keep your word? Are you helpful to others? These things which we consider character, they do not change. At least easily. They can change, but not easily. But personality, that can change in a second, depending on who you're talking to. And you've all seen it. You've all done it. Okay? So personality is something not to be too terribly concerned with, because that's very much a social form. For us, we have to be more concerned about our character. What do we think of ourselves? What is it really deep down inside? Who are we and how do we act towards ourselves and towards others? Okay. But again, even that is changing. Right? Even that can be something new. Because if we couldn't change it, we wouldn't have to worry about it. The real thing we're looking at is I, being. What does it mean to be? What is self? And that's what all of this is about. What is I? What am I when I strip away personality? What am I when I strip away even character? Well, that's what you are when you're completely relaxed and attentive. And that's why it's so terrifying. Because all those things which we identify with they're not there immediately. That's what you experience at that brief moment between sleep and waking. That's why people can often have a profound terror in that moment if it lasts too long and they can't wake up. Yeah. It's the impulse to be. It's not even a thought, it's an impulse, a creative impulse. Now our mind works, that impulse of being operates through our mind. And as we said, the mind, as far as we are concerned, has two functions of processing information, subjective and objective. What we seek in magic to do is to merge these. What we seek in meditation to do is to merge these. Objective is concerned with what's out there. Takes in information and processes it. How does it process it? Through experience. I touch the fire burns. Now I know not to touch the fire. Information. We seek to take that objective information and turn it into something useful for in many ways, our immortality. That's why, if you remember, those of you who went through the Philosophers of Nature course, remember, and what I talked about in Between the Gates is taking a skill and moving it into your subjective experience. That is, how many of you have had a dream and you see something in the dream? A letter, a word, a book, a paragraph, a sound, and you try to remember it, but you can't. Try to read it, but you can't. And then slowly over time, you begin to develop the skill of reading in your dreams. You notice how impossible it was in the beginning? How about math? Any of you have to do math in your dreams? Yeah. Everyone's different. Sometimes you'll get presented with mathematical problems. Well, what would be simple for like a 8-year-old here suddenly becomes impossible for you in your subjective experience, because you want those skills to come with you. That's important because if you'll notice, all of our experience, all of our skill set is part of our memory, and our memory is our life, and that's what we seek to maintain when we talk about immortality, is memory. That's the big one, memory. So that it's not forgotten. You know, and I love this joke, you know, because they've made an industry out of it. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have this big thing where they have a tulku, or reincarnated lama. It's a big thing because in that culture, before the Chinese invasion, if you were a tulku, you inherited the property. It was essentially the property thing. You inherited the property of the previous lama you were a reincarnation of. So you got their lama, you got their property, their students, all this stuff. So it was a big deal to get recognized because there was big cash involved in it very often. And if not cash, at least prestige or something for the family. Well, the joke became that there were so many of these that many of them were expected. Well, if you're a tulku and you're a reincarnated lama, then you should know how to do these things. You should be a quick learner. Because we're just reminding you of what you already know. And of course, a lot of them, they didn't care. This is just a family thing. Oh, they tell me this, I'll do it for the family. So a lot of them didn't even practice. And then other lamas would say, well, you know, you may be a tulku, but you still need to practice. Just for the rest of us. At least get the ritual in, you know. And that's what they're talking about, is do you actually have that memory? Can you access it? As some of you have examples of that, where you have a skill set you're very good at. You just naturally gravitate towards it. You know, that's okay. But we're talking about something more than that, where you can actually function in your dream state. You know, function in that state just as you function here. And that's where we're merging of the subjective and objective minds in that practice, in all of them, really. What is the difference between these as far as we're concerned? Well, the objective mind chooses something, and then the subjective mind is the dutiful servant that carries it out. So all of your choices in life, what we call willpower, is really a subjective decision. I want pasta, I want rice. Now, it may be influenced by a whole bunch of subjective feelings and previous experiences, but fundamentally you make that decision based on what's in front of you. What the world is telling you is available to you. Okay? And once you've made that decision, again, if it's a firm decision, and what means firm? One that is unwavering. What makes something unwavering? Almost always the emotional content with which it is derived from. It is not an intellectual decision for most cases. Even intellectual decisions have behind them a powerful emotional force. And you'll see this particularly with those involved in the sciences. You know, reason may bring you to science, but it does not keep you there. All of the really people I know that really love science love it. Otherwise, it's just too boring to stay in. There has to be a driving fascination to understand what the problem of the day is, whether it be mathematical, whether it be physics, whether it be chemistry, no matter, you know, biology, whatever it is. It has to, you really have to want. There's an emotional force guiding those intellectual decisions. And this is where we get back and forth. You know, you say, man, I am either so complex or so screwed up, I don't know which it is. Yeah. And that's what all those other paths are trying to help us understand, these exchanges. So the objective mind chooses, but the subjective mind provides the energy to carry it out. Because the subjective is just really pure emotion. Whatever we hold to be true, with our deepest feelings, is true for us, and the universe acts accordingly. If we hold it to be true, it's true for us, and then the rest of the universe acts accordingly. It doesn't matter what you hold to be true. I think it was Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. Okay. And that's what we're looking at here. This is a very difficult thing for people to grasp. Many people have trouble with this. But again, on this personal level, this is a very personal level. That's why this is a fairly complex teaching, and yet at the same time very simple. What you hold to be true on the deepest level is true for you. And then the universe acts accordingly. Your own pure being, that is your self-concept of yourself, free of limitations and emotional entanglements, relaxed and attentive and spontaneous, that is who you are. That is yourself. So when you find yourself in meditation or in action, because there's no difference between the two, and you find yourself being very spontaneous and open, insights, we talk about insights and inspiration, that's action, that's good. When you find yourself holding back, and not in a way that says, whoa, stop, you hit the brakes, and next thing you know, some car goes by that would have, clobbered you, T-boned you. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you're frustrated, or you're nervous, or you're anxious. That's something else. That's habituated patterns coming up. Get rid of them. Relax. You don't know what to do, relax. That's the solution to everything. Really, it is. We'll talk about how to do that. Organization of our mind is composed of our voluntary and involuntary conditions. Those conscious decisions which we make over and over again become involuntary or habits. The Hindus and the Buddhists, I don't know if the Taoists use the same word, conditioned, more or less conditioned with experience, conditioning. And that's same with psychology where they talk about operative conditioning. What we seek to do is to undo that conditioning. And if we can't undo it, simply free ourselves from it altogether, which is what we're trying here. Our objective mind is concerned with our day-to-day experiences, our moment-by-moment stuff, but it is subjective mind which is concerned with the big picture. And that's the part which is most important for our psychic unfoldment and experiences. That's why we need to relax and go into it. Relax, settle into that aspect of ourself. That's the holy guardian angel that we don't trust. We don't trust going behind those doors. We don't trust relaxing into it because all this other stuff is there. Sometimes they call that other stuff the guardian of the threshold. The psychic scoria and garbage that we've accumulated over the eons. But if you just relax in face of it, you pass by. You realize that it's a self-creation. It's a self-creation. It's yours. But no one else's, it's yours. So it's okay. Now, meditation and ritual, as we said, are means whereby we seek to function in both the objective and subjective aspects of our consciousness simultaneously, where we become awake within our own unconscious, awake within our own mind. That's why I put so much emphasis on lucid dreaming, okay? To be awake within your own mind. When we are awake within our subconscious functions of mind, we can then formulate and function on ourselves and with ourselves directly. You don't need to do ritual in there. You know? You don't need to. It's direct. You have a direct experience in that way, a direct access. This is what we call dath, or knowledge, where theory and practice give rise to insight or wisdom gained from direct experience. Now, when we look at a cosmic model, we can say that this so-called cosmic mind, if there is one, the Ein Sof, the void, whatever we want to call it, is immediately functioning or existing behind our own subconscious mind. I don't even like to say functioning behind it because it's part of it. It's right there. It's just on a bigger level. It's a continuity. It's not separate, just as our subconscious and conscious minds are not separate. The subconscious, or rather its contents and self-perception, and please pay close attention to this, its self-perception is created by our analysis of our life experiences. And it is the gatekeeper between the objective or experiences of the moment and the transcendental bliss or light, life, and love which we talk about of the cosmic or pure and unconditioned, the unchanging aspects of our mind. This is our indestructible and immortal self. Our subconscious is the gatekeeper. Whatever we think of ourselves to be is true. Therefore, we do all these vast practices to change our self-perception. That's all we're doing. First, we seek to change our self-perception of ourself. And we do this in part by also then seeking to change our self-perception of others. Then we seek to change our self-perception of our relationship to the physical environment that we're in. And then we just continue expanding this outward, including more things into it. That's what all these different visualization practices do. That's all they do. They recondition us. we reprogram ourselves to be less conditioned. And then we start working on even removing that. Now, some people get a little concerned about this. I said, well, look, what happens is things, again, it's natural. I know someone who, we talked to Brian about this on Tuesday. I know someone who had has a business, and the building that it's in, particular building, and as soon as I walked in the door, I said, oh boy, they got a problem here. And then I heard a little bit about the history of the building. I said, oh, yeah, problem here. And I spoke to them again, the owner of the business, and I said, oh, can we see your base? Can I see your basement? I went down in the basement. As soon as I walked in, I said, right here, this is where the problem is. And as she told me about the history of the building, what the medium had told her, and some other things, I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't need to go into meditation. I didn't need to, sit down with my crystal ball. I didn't need to burn incense and talk to the spirits. Just over years and years of work, developed a certain sensitivity that let me know very naturally and casually what the environment was like where I was. You guys have all the same thing. You could probably walk into a restaurant or a kitchen and immediately get a sense of whether this is functioning properly or not. You can walk in and see a band or a club. You can walk into a martial arts studio, right? You get a sense, right? Same thing with medical. You get a patient sits down, and they talk for a little bit, and you get a sense of what's going on here. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's strong. You've developed a certain natural sensitivity. You can do a listing. I bet you can tell right off the bat. You can probably look at a picture of a place and know whether there's going to be a dog even by the address. Now, some of that's history, because you know the geography. But other times it's, this one's going to work, this is going to be a good one, and this one, this is going to be tricky. Because you've developed a natural sensitivity through your training. Now some would say, it's not rational, is it? It's not, these aren't rational decisions that you make. These aren't objective decisions that you make. You're not crunching data. These are, it's right there. It's just right there. You just know. Experience. And that's what we're talking about on this level. Except the experiences include a vast array of information and experience and data that has to do with the psychic, the invisible, the subtle. I prefer the word the subtle. Now, the objective mind, like we said, is the gatekeeper in many ways of our self-perception. What we think about ourselves then goes in the back, and then that becomes the gatekeeper to other experiences. And as we talked about reasoning, the subjective mind, the strengths and weaknesses of deductive reasoning lies on the premise. The weaknesses or strengths of inductive reasoning lies in its process. So if my premise is a good one, I'm healthy, I'm happy, things are going good for me, I can solve problems that come my way. No, it's not easy walking all the time, but I can solve the problems that come my way. Then my subjective mind, our aspect, that energetic aspect of myself, grabs that and works with it. But if I sit around all the time and think, oh man, life sucks, it's horrible, I can't do anything, everyone's against me, blah, 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 it takes that and it runs with it too. It is that simple. So what we're constantly looking at is how do we pay attention to our mind? How do we pay attention to our feelings so that we're constantly focusing on that which is possible? Not Pollyanna-ish, not some hyper-excited way, but just in a very natural and reasonable way that I can solve the problems that come my way. I can be useful to others in helping them solve theirs too. If you do not make yourself equal to God, how can you know God? Now, I like to say the subconscious is like a giant dragon or ogre in the fairy tales. It's very powerful but not discriminatory. It takes everything in and fits them together. Whatever you feed it, it finds a place for it. That's where you find people can be very neurotic because they have conflicting ideas about themselves. You know, it's like mechanisms on an old mechanical watch. You know, if the gears don't line up, what happens? It's like the transmission on my car. Not my car. On that rental truck. As I said to the guy, okay, you know this is your truck, right? I cannot guarantee that the transmission will be better when I return it. They weren't lining up. Okay? They grind. So when anything grinds inside our own mind, what do we get? We get problems. So you have to go in there and find out what the problem is, or you have to stop adding on to it. And the subconscious mind does that. It takes everything and just fits it together. Now this is why discrimination is the first virtue of the path. And we say discrimination is the virtue of what? Of Malkuth. Choose ye wisely. We live in a society where people don't make good choices. And they're making worse ones every day. And that is not our problem. We do not let it be our problem. We help those who we can. And for the rest, that's okay. Okay? You deal with it. Discrimination. There are consequences to your actions. That's what that word is telling us. We must consider the outcomes of our choices before we make them. The virtue of Yusod, the domain to which often we refer to in Kabbalah as the subconscious, is independence and vice. It's idleness. Idleness. Here is the power we seek to make ourselves free. To assess if we are working towards our independence, that is freedom from compulsion, freedom from the cycles of life and death, freedom from the whims of fortune, then we must look at the outcomes of our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. What are the effects of what we think, speak, and do? And for this we must use reason and have experience to base it upon. This experience comes primarily from the material world, and it is here and only here that enlightenment is possible, because it is here that the duality is most pronounced. In us, that duality is demonstrated by the objective and subjective functionings of our mind. Okay? Do you understand what I just said? I said to someone, you know what stupid is? I said, what? I said, stupid is not being able to understand or foresee the outcomes of your actions, regardless of what your IQ score or Mensa card says. Because how often haven't we met people that are so wonderfully smart and can't figure out what's going to happen?
This morning we were eating breakfast, and there's this big emergency door with a gigantic
sign.
Just
Huge
blasted.
sign.
Emergency exit.
Only.
Only. Do not exit unless fire. This woman, this big roly-poly woman, had her breakfast. She just walked right up to that door, looked at the sign, turned around, used her butt to open it, and rolled right out. Fire alarm went off. That's it.
And that's, not caring.
Didn't care at all.
Did not care.
Well, what we do is we look at that environment that we're in and we say, okay, now, if that's the environment, do I want to be with them during the zombie apocalypse? And a part of you says, yes. Yes, I do. Yeah. I'll probably gain an extra 3 hours off that one.
Human meat shield.
Human meat shield. That's what I'll bring that up with my kids. That's what we call them then. But that's it, foreseeing the outcomes of our actions is the ability to make good decisions. The problem is, what do? We second guess ourselves, right? We get hesitant. We choke. We'll talk about that soon, okay? How to overcome that. Remember, our objective senses are limited to our objective conditions, our physical senses. Our interpretations of things define our realities. that woman's interpretation was that this sign doesn't mean anything. We don't even know what was going through her mind,
I don't think anything was.
but probably not, but she was not thinking that that sign actually had meaning to her, or that, oh, that alarm won't go off, or, oh, that won't really matter. Somewhere along the line, whatever was the thinking process was that that sign doesn't mean what it says.
Really?
And I remember the only time I was ever in traffic court, I had an expired registration. And it was, we were moving at the time, the registration expired. Some local yokel decided to pull me over. Oh, jeez. So the next, that's like, I think that was like a Wednesday or Thursday. And I go into traffic court on Monday. And I had my registration, everything, all the paperwork was done. And being very duteous, I asked when do I arrive? Well, you arrive at 8 o'clock. I said, okay, so I'm there at 7:45. You know, you always arrive early for an appointment, right? That's what you do. And I noticed there were 3 people ahead of me. I thought, okay, that's fine. I sign in, so I'm the 4th one. Maybe the 3rd one, 4th one. And we go and we sit down in this box. It's the old jurors' boxes. When we're sitting there, I noticed that this is filling up. It's like not 40 people here. And I'm like, oh man, I'm glad I got here early, right? This is a I suddenly realized, this is a cattle call. You know, when you get there and sign in, that's how they take you. So right off the top, I think, well, this is good because if I'm early, the judge is in a better mood. So I know this, you know, right? Because it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. See, that's my experience with people who have to deal with people who make bad decisions, is that their patience declines over time. It does not increase. I don't remember the first person. I don't remember maybe the second person. All I remember is the third person, the person in front of me. And the person in front of me, I remember the judge saying, I don't even know what they look like. Ma'am, you went through a stop sign and then a red light in front of a police officer, made an illegal turn in a car with an expired registration, an expired inspection, and no insurance. What is it you think I can do for you?
Wow.
I cannot do anything for you. I get up, they say, Your Honor, I'm sorry, my wife and I are moving, we forgot, here's registration, here's the insurance, blah, blah, guys, get out of here. And I'm thinking, man, I would not want to be number 40, you know? We have to be able to perceive the outcomes of our actions. We're here to gain experience. Physical life is about experience, cause and effect, understanding cause and effect. That is what it's about. And from that we gain wisdom. If you understand cause and effect, then we say you are wise. If you do not understand cause and effect, then we say you are unwise. And if you disregard cause and effect, you're just stupid. That's it. Because if you know something, and then you go ahead and do it anyhow, then what else can you do? And this is, but people habituate themselves to activities that make this very subtle. People habituate themselves to setting themselves up for success. You know, you go to the right place, you wear the right clothes, you meet the right people, and you say the right things. And then people who habituate themselves to mediocrity. I know people who are like that. They have a view of life, and it fits in. It's neither too much to this or too much to that, and that's the direction they go. And then I see people who habituate themselves to constant frustrations and failures. Now, this is all cause and effect, but cause and effect that is habituated. So while we cannot create an enlightened condition, because there's nothing to create, it's already there, we can create or habituate ourselves to a state of awakening and alertness to it that allows it to flow as it naturally will. It naturally will flow. The subconscious mind naturally is working. It never stops. It's always working. Therefore, all we have to do is create the proper state of relaxation and attentiveness. And that when we say relaxation, I said attentiveness, and then what I also said, I don't like the word spontaneity too much. What was the one I used?
Uninhibited.
Uninhibited. What happens is as things arise, they trigger a response in us, an emotional response, and then we shut down or we try after them. That's where the uninhibited function comes in. It's like in a dream. You're dreaming, and you know you're dreaming, and then you're trying to do the lucid dream, and what happens? You wake up. And then as you're able to extend that gap, that's because you're more spontaneous, you're more uninhibited. That's a sign, because you're able to extend the gap. That's why this is so important. Now, realization in the mind and consciousness of what we think it is. There's what is and what we think something is. Our goal is trying to get our realization of things to match what is. That's why science is so wonderful. Even though our understanding is subjective, I may or may not be able to share it with others. It's my understanding. The fact is, we can call this whatever we want, but it's all water. It's not something else. Now, through suggestion, which is a fancy word for a plain word for hypnosis, through suggestion, I may be able to get you to think that it's wine, and you get drunk on it. Through your own bad experience, you may think, and children do this often, you see them, they hysterically respond to some kind of condition similar to something they had before. You may think it's terribly tasting medicine, okay? But that's conditioned. That's all conditioned. That's reality. That's relative. That's not what actually is. We're trying to perceive things as they are. That's our goal. Things as they are. We want to sense beyond the normal range of the senses. And that's where our nervous system comes in. This practice is to be able to sense beyond the normal range of the senses. Now the beautiful thing is that willpower is what is the hinges on all of this. And willpower is not gritting your teeth, but it's making a decision and staying firm to it. It's firm because it's emotionally convinced. You're emotionally convinced of the decision. It really is the final judgment of your objective mind. And then the subconscious knows this is, you know yourself that this is your final judgment. You understand? We call it the subjective as if it's a different mark. But I know myself that this is my final judgment. I am convinced of this. And then I act accordingly. Those forces in me act accordingly. We say that the will can be hesitant, inconsistent, or obstinate. Obstinate is, of course, unyielding, which is good. That's what you want in most cases, right? Inconsistent is, we all know that. And then there's hesitant, which is, oh man, do I really want to do that? We don't want the hesitant. We want to be confident that we can overcome whatever problems before us. And this is why I've talked to many of you where I really love the martial arts, because there, things are so fast and spontaneous. They're just so fast and spontaneous that you really get to put to test this question of hesitant, inconsistent, or obstinate will. I mean, you really do. I mean, everyone knows there's that time when they think, oh, this is, there's no reason you should stay in the fight. There's just no reason. None whatsoever. But you do. And either you learn something from it or maybe you win. But same thing in business. You're just going to stay with that client and you're going to work with them. You're not giving up. You're going to make the sale or make whatever. Same thing in healing. You're going to work with that patient. You're going to find out what's wrong. And it's going to get some benefit for them. So we look at this and we say, we've made the decision and we act accordingly. Because what makes us act? The emotional drive. So think of it when your will was completely obstinate. What was behind it? Find that feeling that was behind it. And that's the one you want to apply to each and every one of your situations. Because As Dubuis stated near the end of his Kabbalah course, magic works independent of any philosophy that can be built around it. So I said, we're not concerned with philosophy here, just effects, experience. Practice magic and develop your philosophy from your own experiences. He also said he's to be wary of those who speak too much of white and black magic and not to judge the work of others, only to understand yourself and be free from the restraints others would put upon you. Know the laws, practice them, and grow up. Moralizing weakens the will. Remember we said earlier, you must know the depths. Well, let me tell you, knowing the depths in language and knowing the depths in experience can be two very different things in this domain. There are many people who talk about knowing them, but they're terrified of it. At the same time, we must also know the heights. And there is a school of practice which some of you have introduced to, and only introduced a part of it, and that immediately after the invocation of an angel, after you've had experience with it, and I've only known a few people who've done it this way, you bind yourself to the angel. Okay? And then after the binding of yourself to the angel, you immediately invoke its demonic counterpart. And these are the extremes, bringing them together within yourself. Because these extremes have different qualities to them. Okay? In a non-dual state, there can't be any extreme. You have to bring them together and realize that both of them are an illusion on some level. Both of them are only a part of the whole on some level. So what we have to deal with, as I said earlier, is suggestion. Suggestion is our self-concept. Suggestion is a subtle command, a request, a wish, an order, a law of one's own objective mind to one's own self. We often refuse direct commands of self or others, and that's why we often make appeals subtly. All men know this. One must always make the appeal subtly. Fill in the blank. Is that true? It's always subtle. Directness gets us nowhere. And it's the same with our own emotional mind. It does not want directness. It's always subtle. That's why we work in these magical rituals, in these incantations. That's why they're designed in such a way to bypass any guardian we may put up, any obstinate rule. Hence the chanting, hence the rhythm, hence the number of recitations. All this is designed to make a subtle, indirect suggestion to ourselves so that it comes in and gets wrapped in rather than trying to blast through the door. And with this we say the subconscious is perfect memory, which is critical because that means it holds on to everything, and memory is the working tool of life, as we said earlier. And what do we want? We don't want to be asleep. We want perfect awakeness, which is memory. To be awake, to remember, to be alive, the same thing. What makes for good memory is not the duration of an experience, but its intensity. Again, the emotional qualities that come with it. The nice thing about this aspect of ourself, this emotional aspect of ourself, is that its tendency is always to do constructive things, things that are helpful and beneficial. It's only when we get in the way that it does things which are, or directed otherwise, that it does things which are less beneficial for us. So as Regardi states, simply trust it. Stop trying to fix it. Stop trying to, make suggestions every day in every way I'm getting better and better or something like that. And simply have faith and confidence that it naturally is already moving what is in your best guidance, what is in your best direction. You've given it what we can think of as a holistic message, if you will, if that makes sense, a holistic program. Where before you were trying to work on a piece by piece by piece, particularly in the magical operations and those kinds of things, you're trying to fix things piece by piece. Now you're giving it a global command. You're going to do the right thing. I trust in that. And then you go from there. Now this is important because any message said with sincerity and honesty, remember, emotional conviction becomes a law for yourself. And this is your own law, the own law of your mind, the own law of your life. So that's why repetition is so important. We repeatedly, what we do repeatedly, we strengthen. And we want to strengthen our repeated conviction and confidence in our own abilities. And in the wellness of our own life, regardless of what's going on around us. Regardless, we do not want to make it dependent on external circumstances or people. We are just, whatever happens will be the best. And everything, whatever happens will be the best for me, and everything is going to work out according to my plans. But you see how difficult that can be to really grab onto that, because it's, well, where do I grab onto? What do I do? You don't do anything. That's the point. Well, sure, you make your plans and you put your menu together and you do sales calls, but you don't worry.
Drop it.
Yeah, don't worry. Just keep moving forward. See, because our decision is from the mind, we make the decision, and that's willpower. And what's interesting is that decision is executed what? But through that deepest part of ourself. Remember the meditation I was going to find the deepest part of yourself? That is executed through the deepest part of yourself, because that part of you, that emotional content, has all of the qualities of the cosmos to draw upon. As we said, we are a microcosm and the macrocosm. Within you, it has all these energies and powers. You don't need to do symbols for it. You don't need to do incantations for it. You don't need to do mantras. They're already present in there. And not only is it there, but it also has access to all of those within everyone and everything else too, to draw upon. If it were not that way, then all of the psychic phenomena which we talk about would not be possible. This was one of Du Bois' quotes too. He said in one of the lessons, Joseph Glanville, the demonologist and theologian of the 17th century, writes, "And here dwells the will which never dies. Who then knows the mysteries of the will in all its vigor? For God is but an enormous will which pervades all things by the very essence of its intention. Man never surrenders by himself to the angels or to death, but only because of the weakness of his will." He said, what is beingness? Beingness is an intensity. When you really relax and feel yourself, there's an explosive intensity to it. Even though it's calm, it wants to do. It's an impulse to create and to do. Even in stillness. With this, we can experience the inspiration which comes from this attunement and is made manifest in forms within and through the unlimited power of that thing I keep calling a subconscious mind, that deepest aspect of ourself. I close myself off to the physical world so that I'm not stimulated. And if I practice well enough, I can even use that stimulation, as we'll talk about, to go in. I enter into my domain, my mind. And because that is calm and still and I'm undistracted by whatever thoughts may arise or images that come my way or ideas or memories, let them pass off, let them go. I can experience an inspiration, an insight. It may not even be something I'm thinking about, something that I was aware of, but it can still come to me. Something that I can be, or I can direct it through a desire. I need some insight. How do I solve this problem? How do I get this client happy? Get them off my back. Or it can be greater cosmological issues too. It doesn't matter, as it's all possible. And that attunement comes through what? Attunement is what? When things are in harmony, right? They're lined up. So the calming, again, all that relaxation and calming is what allows that to happen. What's nice is when we try to get relaxed, all these things bubble up. And what have I told you before? Don't worry about them. Write them down. Maybe it's something important that you need to address. Write it down, and then start all over again. And you'll find it's easier. You've paid attention to what your mind is telling you is important. Right behind, like you're walking out the door and your secretary or your assistant or your friend says, oh, by the way, if you're going to the store, get me this. Well, you may not think it's a big deal, but actually it was, because since you forgot to get it, now you're going to hear about it for the next 3 hours.
So you're saying is, if things are coming into your mind when you're starting to do it, write it down and then start all over?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it may be important messages. Maybe it's something that you need to pay attention to.
Okay.
You know?
Quick question. How would that fit in with prayer, for example? I mean, how would you consider them two completely
Prayer is
separate things?
suggestion. Prayer is a preliminary. Prayer is a suggestion. All prayer is a suggestion. It's the decision of, this is my ideal. I'm a verbalization of your ideal. That's what all prayer is. And it's we can say it's conversing with our subconscious, but I would say what it is it's conversing, but it's also reprogramming, reformatting, if you want. That's why the more verbalized prayer is very important, but at the same time, as I've said to you earlier, the most important prayer is not verbal. It's not spontaneous. It's not a ritualized format. It's a thing that just you do, you deeply feel, and then you relax into it. And that's why you would say, like Kelpius' book on prayer states that silent prayer is the most important prayer. So when you go back and look at my book on prayer, read the sections from Kelpius where he talks about silence, just relax. You're not asleep. You're very attentive and awake to what's going on inside yourself. But you're also what? You're not pulled away and distracted by it. So that means you're, unconditioned, uninhibited. Now, the best time to make suggestions to yourself is when you're falling asleep or when you're waking up, because this is what we call, and I like this term, Kenneth Grant called it the mauve zone, that in-between zone, and it really fits well. This is that zone where our levels of mind are shifting, and they're overlapping. So it's very easy to communicate with our deepest level of self. Interestingly enough, this is the time when most people will experience varying degrees of psychic trauma from things that are either happening around them or things that are arising within them. Okay? This period of suggestion, that's why, you should not fall asleep with the television on or the radio. Ever. Unless you have very carefully selected your musical selection. Ever.
My whole childhood, talk radio all night long. Blaring out of my dad's room. Nightmares. Sometimes.
It's not good. People don't understand that. They this is the time when it's most easy. So when you're falling asleep is when you cultivate the greatest ideas of yourself. That's when you do these dream practices that are in between the gates. When you're waking, that is when you can cultivate them. You can even just cultivate the single notion that, as I said earlier, the gods, the heroes, the saints, the demigods, the elements, all these things manifest real to me. This day, real to me. That's complete. Everything's complete right there. Yeah, what brings hesitant and inconsistent will is, how do I know if I really want this? And that's where you have to just have faith. Faith in yourself that everything works out well. Faith in your idea of God. Faith in your idea of your higher self, your holy guardian angel, whatever you're calling it. Because moralizing is what destroys people. Moralizing. That's the That would be the negative extreme of not even considering the consequences for others. But if you consider the consequences on others too much, you essentially take any responsibility away from them for their actions. And that's why people stay in bad relationships or make excuses for bad behaviors all the time, because they're constantly finding an excuse for others. This doesn't mean that you don't consider your impact on others. You do, but they're living beings too. They're conscious. They're sentient. They've got to take responsibility for their lives. And we can get to the point where you just would never do anything. And you see that with folks. I know some folks, they moralize so much, they don't do anything. They just grind themselves into neutrality. Now, here we talk about individuals, and we like to hear the word evolution thrown around a lot. I don't particularly like it word, because evolution is an organism's adaptation to its environment. It is not a predetermined plan. I know within Masonry we like to use the word the grand architect of the universe, and we like to talk about God's plan in different traditions. But I don't particularly believe there is a plan per se. Or if there is a plan, I don't believe it's some predetermined endpoint like you see in eschatology. That everything is moving towards this. Everything may be moving towards that. It doesn't mean everything is going to get to that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other possibilities. Because only individual organisms evolve. Because only individual organisms adapt. We as individuals adapt to our circumstances. We as individuals may come together and form a larger single organism that then has an impact on society or our community. But that's still dependent upon each and every one of us as individuals. So I'm somewhat hesitant to talk about this idea of evolution without bringing that point across, because only individuals evolve, not groups or entire organisms. Evolution begins when the impulse of a higher order is manifest. An impulse. It's a feeling. It's not even a clear idea often. It's just a feeling. Okay. In the mind, the ideal manifests as spirituality. And in matter, this ideal manifests in terms of form. Because you need a higher form to express higher. I don't even like that. I think more complex is probably better. You often need more complex forms to express more complex ideas. The key to all of our work is imagination. Juliano talks about that a great deal. So in Eros and Magic in the Renaissance, as difficult as it can be to read, I really suggest you spend time with it. Imagination is the key to memory, as Giordano Bruno wrote about in his book on memory. All magic is an application of the imagination on some level. Even if it's not directly formulated as an image, it's still the application of imagination. Imagination has three levels. One is memory. That is, we call upon a previous experience and bring it forth. That's what I said about conditioning, where we have to be careful because our habits can automatically form the condition. The habit automatically evokes an image or a sensation. Remember, it's not just visual. It can be tactile, auditory, emotional, and that automatically triggers a response. And that's magic. It may not be ritualized, may not be formalized, but that's magic. And that's what music does. That's what advertising does. That's what good food does. You get something good, you want more of it, right? Because you have the memory of what it was like and how good it was. Imagination can be something suggested but not experienced. I kind of have an idea about it, but I haven't experienced it yet. People who've never experienced acupuncture wonder, well, what are these pins like, these needles like in me? You know, their idea of having a needle in them is usually a painful experience. It's something they didn't like. You know, they pricked themselves sewing or something like that. So they're a little hesitant. I say, well, you know, when the needles go in, you don't even feel them. You know, I mean, maybe you feel a little tap to get on there, but when they're there, I've never really felt them. They're like, well, you know what they're like. It's almost like nothing's there. And they have trouble. They have to imagine what that's like. You know, children do this all the time. They're trying to, something is implied, but it's not experienced. So they're always working with their imagination to try and understand what would this be like. And then there's the third level, which is what we do in magic, which is mental creations and idealizations, ideals. This is what all the marketing books on self-help are about. Mental creations and poetic ideals. This is what your business plan is about. This is what the sales pitch is about. This is about the ideal treatment plan. If everything goes just right. Okay? But in magic, we bring up this emotional component and invoke this component of otherness. That there's energetic and subtle energies available to us that can make this happen and assist us in making this happen. That's why this imagination is so important, because again, it's not just the ideas of imagery, but it's all the feelings and components that go with it.
Quick question. So the number one was memory. Number two, I kind of...
Just suggested but not experienced. My imagination, I suggest something to you, but you haven't experienced it. Fill in the blank.
I was conditioned to do that before you even said that.
Mm-hmm. See, I'm conditioning you as we go.
Yeah,
Everything is some level of conditioning.
That's right.
Theosophy, Kabbalah, mysticism have recognized the power of the imagination, and the development of the imagination is the true objective of celestial magic and spiritual alchemy. Magical rituals are an organized principle for the imagination, wherein the objective and subjective aspects are brought together so that the microcosmic aspects of our being can express itself macrocosmically. Okay? Imagination is everything. In its own order, it is supreme. Facts, principles, and theories are barren until they are vivified by the power of intelligence. Magical arts have esoteric powers and are spiritually illuminating only on the purified plane of intense and supreme imagination. The true place of magic is the psychic and the translucent. You know what I say? People go to science because of facts and reason and logic, but that's not what keeps them there. It's the emotion. It's the dream. It's the desire to help or to heal or to discover something fantastic. Again, the imagination is what drives people. Understand that and use it, because you're going to use it anyhow. Just now use it knowingly. You know? Again, looking forward to that person who finally understands the quality of your good creation. I mean, do you remember the feeling you get when someone actually pays for the chocolate who's never had it before, and then suddenly realizes that, wow, this is really great stuff. This is so much better than Hershey's.
It's rewarding.
It's rewarding, but it's rewarding in what? An emotional way. It's not rewarding in just a flat intellectual way. Oh, well, that's nice. So, if it is, you wouldn't keep doing it. You know, it's rewarding emotionally. They realize, they really get it. They get why I do this. You know, that's not nice. Yeah, that's right. So, now this is the critical part. Again, the intellect can inhibit the natural powers of the emotions. And that's what we're always trying to understand. How do we inhibit this and how to overcome it? And we can overcome it by analysis, analytical meditation, or we can overcome it by surrender, release, which is what Regardi spoke about in that last one. Because without any emotions, there's no karma. There's no cause and effect. That's really important. No emotion, no karma, no cause and effect. This relates to the gap. What we've always talked about is the gap. The gap between stimulus and response in our mind. That's what I'm always trying to tell you, to get into the gap. Release there. Rest in it. This getting into the gap, extending the period between stimulus response or, delayed satisfaction. Okay, we do this with children and dogs, right? The way you train a dog is delayed satisfaction. The way you train a child is to delay satisfaction. What do we think about adults who can't delay their satisfaction? They're impulsive. We consider them immature, right? Or weak will, because they're not in control. They can't make a decision. They'll just go whatever stimulates them. That gap is what allows us to then rest in that void and allow things to be okay. But when people are immediately stimulated and immediately respond, we don't consider them free beings. They're not free individuals. We don't even really consider them. People like that aren't even really, they don't even have personalities that we want to be around. They're always flat and two-dimensional because everything is push button. Everything on them is conditioned.
You see this with junkies. They almost have all of them have the exact same baseline persona.
It's all the same.
It's all exactly just stimulus response, stimulus response.
That's it. That's it. And it's in this gap where psychic phenomena, spiritual awakening takes place. It's in that gap. It's in that gap that lucid dreaming takes place. It's in that gap that intuition, insight takes place. It's in that gap where the aha takes place. And that gap can take place anytime, when you're doing dishes, when you're taking a shower, when you're driving. But it's essentially the space between stimulus and response. You're okay. You've created an opening, and you're in it. Again, you're relaxed, you're alert, and you're uninhibited. And that's when it happens. Now, one of the easiest ways to get into that gap is through silence and sound. So this afternoon, we're going to go for lunch now. And this afternoon, we're going to do a lot of practices. As you know, this is typically how we do the classes. There's a lot of theory in the morning, and in the afternoon, we do most of the practices. Okay. With that said, I'd like to point out to you, often we need a symbol for our work just to focus on. Really, there are so few for this type of thing, but one of the best ones is a crystal ball or a clear sphere, because that is what we are. Clear, luminous, open, all possibility. So I leave that here as our reason for using this one. So we will go to lunch, and then we will come back and we'll finish up our practices. Okay? Sound good? Okay. And if you haven't given me money, give me money.
Gotta break up the skull.
Yeah. Everyone good? Any questions on anything? Okay, write them down. We'll do them.
I had a quick one just on the last point you were talking about. When we discussed the gap, are we talking about what in Vajrayana they call Rigpa?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think so. Well, I think that I have to go check that up, because even those things, all the schools don't have identical meanings to those words. I know there's a Sakya Rinpoche who's going to be doing some an actual dictionary. What do they call it?
Lexicon.
With all the meanings of the word, and then the school's different meanings of what that word means. Because the schools often don't have the same meaning.
The gap is the aha moment, too.
That allows the aha to take place.
Okay.
That's the space or the environment in which the aha takes place.
Or maybe, for example, it's like if you're reading a whole bunch of books, or you're really into it, and all of a sudden you're doing something, and all of a sudden it comes to it.
That's right, because there's a split second there when you're very relaxed. You mean, see, we have these split second moments. What happens is we're extending that so it's no longer just a split second, and maybe it's a second, or maybe it's 2 seconds, or maybe it's 3, or maybe it's now that lucid dreaming experience. We're just extending, that's why I call it extending the gap. We're making it wider and wider so that we recognize it. Recognize it. See, we have it all the time. The problem is you don't recognize it, and that's why I spent time on it early in the morning. How can we recognize it so that we can condition ourselves to build upon it, and get out of the thinking of doing. All of our earlier programming is, it's beneficial to us, but it's don't do this, then it's do this, and then it's we'll manipulate this. And they're all aimed at the same idea, but the reality is now you have to say, okay, well, the reason the path of negation doesn't work, or only works to a certain point, is because after a while there's nothing left to take away, except, well, then you break down into chaos. The reason the path of action doesn't work, meaning, doing good deeds doesn't work, is because you can't do enough of them. In and of themselves, they're just an expression of an ideal, they're not an ideal, okay? And then the reason the magical path doesn't work is because it's a constant manipulation. See, we would say, even in the magical path, we would say, there's no ritual you can do to invoke your holy guardian angel. You can only create conditions that allow it to arise. There's nothing that you can do. They would also say that you can't make the stone, in a sense. Well, kind of what they're hinting at is, well, you can bring conditions together where you create it, but you have to get out of the way. Part of those conditions is stepping back and allowing nature to take its course. That's why they're always talking about nature, imitating nature. So that's what's part of you're imitating nature. Same thing here, you're imitating nature. I'm not going to do anything, I'm just imitating nature. Rather than think, what can I do to do it? Sometimes you have to stop doing it.
Basically, what we're trying to do is bring back our natural feel.
Exactly. That's what they're all trying to do at some different way. This is just more direct. This is just very direct. Okay, let's see what we have here. Those of you who've been here before, you know that there are certain places we can go for lunch together or separately. It doesn't matter. It's completely up to you. You can stay here if you like. There are, is anyone planning on staying here? No? No? Then we can get, I don't know. I was thinking for myself, and you're free to join me. It's probably Chinese. That's the closest. But if you don't
that's
know,
that one down
yeah,
there.
go down to the Peking Chef, go down there. So if that's what you like, we can create a caravan outside. So that means moving this way.